Welcome back to the Intelligent Builder podcast, sponsored by Plutus Agents. Today, I'm joined by Austin Kent, the CEO of Kent Development, a family-owned residential and commercial developer based in Dallas, Texas. Austin went from college football at SMU to starting the company and funding his first projects by selling real estate, flipping houses, and building spec homes in emerging neighborhoods. He's a second-generation builder as well, who's now running a lean team, blending old-school construction experience from his father with modern systems and scaling fast. So we'll talk about what he's been learning while building in one of the most competitive markets in the country. So Austin, it's great to have you on.
Thanks, Owen. Happy to be here.
Yeah, no, of course, man. So let's kind of start from the beginning. So you went to SMU for football, then pivoted pretty quickly into real estate. So can you walk us through that stretch? What was that, I guess, say, identity crisis moment where you hung up the cleats and decided to go on out of business in real estate?
Sure. So, start from the beginning. I'm originally from the Pacific Northwest, Portland, Oregon, and grew up playing football. Just like most young athletes, your goal is to end up going professional, and that's kind of all that you do, and that's your identity on your day to day. And so, after high school, I played junior college before ending up in Dallas at SMU, and most people that know me know I'm not a guy that kind of tests the waters. I'm a dive in head first. I'm very passionate, and I think that's a good and a bad thing. But it was my second season at SMU when I woke up in the middle of 2 days, and I just had this feeling that you know this was the first time my whole life I realized that maybe this wasn't what I wanted to do forever. So in that moment, because I wasn't 100% in it, I just hung up the cleats and definitely had an identity crisis, like you said, because this is something I've done for the last, 15, 16 years. And having all this time in my hands, I just said, all right, what's something I could do for work while still being a student? And so I got into real estate on the sales side. So I was selling residential houses for a brokerage down here, and while still going to school. And so about the end of my first year, I had a deal I presented to an investor, and they just said, Austin, I like it, but I don't think it's a good enough deal for us to take a risk on. And I said, you know what? I think it's something that we absolutely should try to do ourselves. And so I called my father, who's been in construction my whole life. He should have his own company, but unfortunately for him and my mother, he had myself and my sister that he had to take care of, so he couldn't really take risks at that point in his career. So I called him and said, hey, I have enough money to come in on the down payment to purchase this house. If you can help me out with the financing for the construction loan. He said, absolutely. So that was our very first project. And we ended up putting on the market, and we had 14 showings, I think, in the first week, multiple offers, and we ended up selling, making a little bit of money. So we flipped a few more houses over the next couple of years, but really at that point, a lot of people were starting to try to buy and flip houses. I think it's because that Chip and Joanna Gaines TV show was online, so everyone wanted to be a home flipper, and plus a lot of times with remodels, you never know kind of what you're going to get behind door number one. So I just started looking into more of trying to do our first new build. So we found a lot in now an amazing area, but at the time it was definitely redeveloping, and we built our first spec home. So I was doing this while still a student at SMU. At this time, I was now a part-time student. So the way it worked is you had certain classes in the fall that were only offered in the fall, certain classes in the spring. And by being part-time, that kind of doubled the amount of years I had to stay in undergrad, which is kind of a crazy story in itself. All my teachers knew me because I had to repeat, multiple semesters with them. So they were all very supportive. And sometimes I had to just let them know, hey, I got a trade meeting I got to go run to, or you got a business call. And they were happy to work with me on that. So we built our first house. We had some early success, and we sold once again, made a little bit of money. But at this time, I didn't really look at real estate as my profession or my career. It was kind of more of a side hustle. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I ended up going into a complete different direction. And I had a tech startup I was co-founder of, did that for a year, ended up not working out. So then what did I do? Went back to real estate. We built a beautiful home. It was on the cover of Dallas Style Design magazine. It's just a gorgeous home. And This was at the end of 2019, just before COVID. So obviously no one knew what was going to be happening. Well, at that time, I had another opportunity, which was opening and running a fitness franchise. So I ended up opening up a gym franchise here in Dallas. And of course, COVID hit. And we were still able to kind of hustle and get it open, kind of piecemeal the deal together. It went well, but I ended up selling that a couple of years later because I'm a real estate guy and I wasn't in the business to be running a gym. So then I got back into real estate for a year while we were building a couple duplexes here in Dallas. I was actually hired as an owner's rep. Kent Development was hired as an owner's rep, which was almost like a consultant for a developer that was building a surf park out in Palm Springs, California. So every Monday for a year, I would Uber to the airport and fly out to Palm Springs. And then every Thursday, I'd fly back. So while I was doing that, we were also building a couple homes out here. But once again, it was kind of still a slow enough pace that it wasn't quite full time. I was able to still work on these other projects while building here in Dallas. And then this kind of led us to maybe 2022, beginning of 2023. A developer from out of town, and we helped put together a couple deals for them that were larger townhome projects. And they just said, Austin, if you're going to do this, we need to make sure that you bring your father on board because he's the expert. I tell everyone, anything under 10 stories, my father's an expert on. And like every startup, you're only as good as your people. So I couldn't think of anyone else better than to ask to be my partner than my father. And so I remember calling him up. At this time, he was working for a national builder. He was the director of construction. I said, all right, Dad, it's time for you to step away. We've talked about this for a while, but you need to come down to Dallas and work with your son. And so we did that. And our first project together down in Dallas was we were general contractor building 20 townhome apartments for a out-of-state developer. And it went well, but that was just kind of the start of our turning this side hustle into the career and company that we are now, Kent Development.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you kind of had a little bit of a mix of various businesses throughout that kind of initial period there. And I love that you're really all in or nothing, right? So you kind of mentioned some of the work you do, like the infills in Dallas and high-end custom homes and some townhomes, even some commercial work. So what's that mix? What's like a typical project for you? And then the mix between, residential and commercial.
Well, I mean, whenever you have a startup, you would like to have a vision and a game plan going into like what you can really focus on and what you specialize in. And for us, our team actually has a commercial. Most of our employees have a commercial background, and which is great because it's a lot easier to come from a commercial background and build a single family house than go from being a single family home builder to building an apartment building. So all of our backgrounds are kind of come from commercial, and however, our developers have a huge mix. And so whenever you're first getting started, beggars can't be choosers, man. You're just doing whatever you can, out hustling, networking to try to find that next deal. And so it's kind of evolved over time where we started, our first house was back in 2017. And then here we are doing townhomes. Well, now we kind of have a good consistent mix of three different verticals, I'd call them. So we have our residential spec homes. So single families, and all this is infill in Dallas. So single families, duplexes, single family attached products. And then you have your kind of high-end luxury homes / custom homes. So we have a couple homes right now we are building for clients that are just beautiful, beautiful homes, multi-million-dollar homes. And then we also have the townhomes and small apartments, that division that we have. And so most of those projects kind of got pushed due to where interest rates were at and where buyers were at kind of in the market. And so a lot of our projected starts for 2025 got pushed to Q1, Q2, 2026. But those are the three specialties we have. We also do some commercial TI, but right now, I mean, when things get a little bit slowed down, you kind of got to figure out where your next cash flow is going to be at, because we have a team of 6 employees, and so you always have to have something in the works to make sure everyone's getting fed and everyone can keep their salary.
Yeah, I know for sure. I know we talked a little bit about that in our last conversation, that like awkward phase where you have to hire ahead of revenue so you're ready
Yep.
when the big projects hit. So what's maybe a specific decision there where it kind of hurt in the short term, but you're glad you made it? Maybe a hire.
Yeah, great question. So whenever you have a larger project that's getting started, you typically get paid. You get paid your general conditions, which is the salaries. One of the things is the salaries from who's going to be managing that project. So, but you don't want to bring on a new employee the day the project starts. That's not going to be successful for anyone. So you of course got to bring them on at least 60 days in advance. And sometimes you do that, you have a projected start date and then permits or something changes when the actual start date happens. So it ends up getting pushed further out. And, being a startup and just being self-funded, you don't really have that huge kind of capital reserve account that you can just pay from. It's typically coming from your own pocket, but I mean, it is what it is. And so, that's kind of what's happened in the past, but right now we're fully staffed up, which is great. So our team has the capacity to take on another 2, 3, 4 large projects before we do have to bring someone else in-house. And when we were first getting started, it was a lot of contract labor, 1099s, but whenever you do become a full-time company and you're working with these developer partners who you want to make sure you put your best foot forward. You can't have someone that's 1099. It has to be someone that's under your own company, the Kent Development kind of umbrella, because they're going to make sure that they put forward their best foot to hopefully earn the next business, the next deal with that specific developer.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Cool. And kind of speaking of how you have a good team now, I know over the last few years you've gone from roughly, I think it was 1.5 to then around 5 million in volume, then in that eight-figure range now. So what did you underestimate from, I guess, about scaling from that kind of small but busy to now like a real operation with people and overhead and stuff like that?
Well, I mean, I think for with anything, growth can hopefully will come whether you're ready or not. And so we always try to stay ahead. And, like I mentioned earlier, I'm not someone that's just doing this just to do it. If we're going to do something, we're going to do it 100%. And so I think, in the very beginning, it was just when it was still more of a side hustle, it was just doing what you can just to pay yourself. And then once you see the opportunity and where this kind of machine can go, you really need to make sure that you're ready and staffed up. But I think, personnel is definitely the most successful thing that could make or break a company, especially in the earlier stages. And, it's really hard for employees to kind of have the same mentality as the owners, right? And because I think, majority of people, they clock in, they clock out, and that's it. But when you're part of a startup, it's a whole different type of mentality because even though they might not be an owner, they also have the opportunity to grow as fast as the owners of that company do grow, as long as they put forth their best effort and have the mentality that, hey, if I help this grow, then I know that, Austin is going to take care of us down the road. And that's just one of those startup versus large company kind of, uh, situations and, like mindsets that you got to have.
Yeah, definitely. People are very important. I remember you were telling me in our last conversation too that you treat your people very well. I guess I'll give an example of my father. You treat your people the same way, but so he's started working for a construction company about a year ago, and they're growing very, very fast. They're up to about 200 million in projects now. They were at about 50 a year ago, and he's been a part of that growth. So obviously he gets raises and he's treated very well. You treat your people the same way, which is very important. And I know you also wear a lot of hats at the same time, doing the pre-construction stuff, estimating, raising money, nurturing the relationship, stuff like that. So while your dad's running the construction side, at your current size, what's a typical week look like for you?
Well, I mean, there's always a different schedule, different day. Nothing's typical, unfortunately, which is sometimes a bummer because I love to have my Apple Calendar loaded up, ready to go, and then sometimes you just have to adapt, pivot, and go move on to the next thing. But yeah, so it's hard to kind of let go early on in a startup and with your own company because it's your baby. But you got to be able to trust that your partners or your employees are doing their job. And that's kind of when you, over time, once they prove that they can do it, you can let it go. And then you can focus more on your own productivity and your own kind of schedule. So for me, a lot of my roles are definitely business development. That's number one. So where's that next deal coming from? In the past, it was, I don't know where it is coming from, so I need to go find it. And now, fortunately, we do have a pipeline. We do have a great group of partners, developers that we know where the deal's coming from, but the whole thing is about when. So you kind of throughout the week, one normal thing that I always do consistently is you got to plant those seeds. So whether that seed of future business grows a month from now or 6 months from now, if you don't plant it today, you're not going to reap the benefits down the road. So that's always something typical, I would say. The next one is being a younger, hungry company. We do a lot of upfront pre-construction to earn the trust and earn the business of either new developers or developers that we're already working with. So a lot of times it's, hey, Austin, here's a piece of land. What can I do with it? What do you think? Is it a good deal, bad deal? So, well, the first thing is you got to look up the zoning. You got to see, okay, what's the highest and best use? And fortunately, with my background, it just being a realtor to kind of where we've got now, I have a pretty good process that I could quickly figure out if that deal is worth looking at. And so a lot of times it's spending a few hours a week just putting together performas for these developers, knowing that they very well might not pan out, but at least it's just something saying, hey, I know that Austin's going to put forward the little extra work in order. And then hopefully if the deal makes sense, and we're going to use them to build the project. And then of course, you have your weekly teams meetings for projects that are ongoing, projects that are in pre-construction. A lot of these kind of larger townhome projects or smaller multifamily, there's constant back and forth with the consultants. You got your architects, your engineers, depending on what stage of pre-construction you're at. Because, one thing that we always tell our clients is that the earlier we can get into a project, the better. Doesn't mean you have to commit to us right away, but the earlier we can start sitting in these meetings, understanding the project, we can really help eliminate those big ticket cost items down the road. And the way it works is you typically get one revision when you work with an architect or an engineer. And if you get past that point and have to go back and redraw, they charge you for it. So we like to be involved early on. We could see, okay, this is a little bit over designed, or this is going to cost a lot of money. And we can kind of make those suggestions right then and there. So the developer can decide on the spot, hey, let's not go that direction. That's more money than I want to pay. Or, you know what, I actually do want to pay that little extra amount. I see value in putting the money there. So that's really where a lot of the time is taken right now. And, I really do like being in charge of the estimating when we do get to that point. So once the plans are done, because at the end of the day, if a budget gets blown or we go over budget, which fortunately hasn't happened on projects where everything's been bought out, there's always allowances you give. And sometimes people decide to go spend more than the allowance. But if we ever did go over budget, I'm going to have to be the one to answer for that regardless. So I want to make sure I'm the one that understands what our true costs are. And it obviously won't be like that forever. Hopefully down the road, we'll be able to hire an estimator. But for right now, that's just something that's very critical, because budgets and finishing construction on time are the two biggest things that developers will kind of look back and grade their GC partner on.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that makes a lot of sense. And it's great the way that you treat your relationships with these developers too. And you're able to, if you get in early, kind of fix those mistakes on paper before they become, real mistakes. What's maybe, if you had to list, say, 2 to 3 responsibilities that you would rather not delegate because they kind of anchor the trust or quality of what you're doing, what would those 2 to 3 traits be? Or, sorry, responsibilities
Well,
be?
I mean, like I just mentioned, estimating, I think for right now, that's critical. I mean, even if I'm not involved on the day to day, if an owner was to call me and ask me a question, I still need to be able to speak for it. I don't want to say, I'm sorry, I don't know. Just that kind of takes away from I guess how involved you really are as an owner. So estimating is so important. Like I said, if a budget's blown, why was it blown? Because I'm going to have to be the one to speak on it. Second one is just, the relationship aspect. One thing I think we really separate ourselves from with our partners is, unfortunately, there's a lot of contractors out there that have a bad rep, that have given the industry a bad rep because they kind of play the cat and mouse game with their developers, which means they try to hide money and move it around and make a quick buck. And that's just absolutely not how we do business. We're 100% relationship based, not transactional based. So if I'm working with someone, it's not just because we need the money. It's not because I mean, we've had to turn down certain deals because it wasn't worth the money. We could tell that there was going to be issues and just we didn't maybe click with that developer. But I'm in it for the long haul. I typically, most of the time, I mean, business is business, but we become somewhat of friends with the developers just because they see how honest and how transparent we are with them, and they just trust us. And so it's a lot easier to work with a developer, earn their trust, earn their business, and then the next time there's a deal that comes up, they're calling you rather than screw someone over, make a quick buck, then go find the next deal. So I'd say business development and estimating are probably the two most important things right now that I wouldn't want to delegate to anyone else.
Yeah, no, I get you. That's great. That's great. That shows you're a good, honest company too, which is awesome. So kind of riffing off of responsibilities, I guess, you mentioned Procore as one of the biggest line items you have. So for a company that's, that early 8-figure range, what does Procore genuinely do for you that you maybe couldn't live without? And then where do you still see some pain?
Yeah, I mean, so for software, we use our construction team uses Microsoft Project for all of our scheduling. There's probably some other more updated softwares out there that you could do your scheduling through, but that's what my father's always used, and it is really good because you do have to manually put everything in and then link it together. So at the end of the day, it really does help our construction team understand the dates that they're putting in. I think if it was automated, and I could be wrong, but if it was automated, it might be a little bit easier to lose sight of what they're actually saying, instead of stopping and realizing, okay, if I'm saying tile's going to take 2 days and there's 6 bathrooms or 20 bathrooms, then that's obviously something wrong. So Microsoft Project, that's something we use. Procore, I mean, the whole reason we started using it in the first place is because of our larger projects. It's a very commercialized software. You really don't get that on the residential end, but because we already pay for the license, then we use it on all of our projects. And yes, it does come with a price point because it scales with your company volume. But right now, I think the best thing it does is it allows us a centralized location for our partners, our trades, and then of course us, our construction team, internal team, and architects to go to one location to get all the plans. You can see updated pictures. We use it for our daily logins. One big thing is, if there's bad weather, we can log in and say when there's been a weather change that's affected the construction schedule. And then, of course, if there's any RFIs, requests for information, everyone is linked through that. So when it gets blasted out, everyone on that email chain that you select is aware that, hey, there might be a change in the plans or there's a detail coming. Here it is. So honestly, I would say Procore and then Microsoft Office are the two main softwares we use. And then, pain point wise, I definitely, and we mentioned this the other day, I do all the estimating myself. And that spreadsheet has evolved from years of trial and error. And because I didn't come from a professional estimating background, I could be taking a few extra steps that cause a little bit more time than necessary, or it might be a little unorganized, but it works for me. However, if there was something I could do to help speed up and make my estimating more efficient, I would be extremely interested in that. And I think we also discussed that's something that you do with your company with Plutus Agents. So we'll definitely be talking more about that.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, we helped another contractor in the same western side of the country as you. But anyways, business is always about, iteration. So constantly iterating, but at the same time, keeping it simple. I like you were using Microsoft just because it's simpler. And the scheduling, having someone really do it or having AI not do it, it's simpler and it makes more sense at times. And you mentioned a few times throughout the podcast and in our last conversation that there is a pipeline, but it's about developers actually pulling the trigger. So
Yeah.
maybe you're at kind of an inflection point. So what do you think has to happen, say in the next 12 months? I know development in real estate is like a long game. You never really know because the projects are so long, but in 2026, what has to happen for you to look back and be like, yeah, 2026 was a win?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's certain things you can control and there's certain things that you can't control, unfortunately. And one of those things is mainly for the larger projects. I'd say the 5 million plus projects, it's when the developer decides it's the best time to pull the trigger. It's a little bit easier sometimes if they can get it, if it's a for rent product than it is a for sale product. I mean, that comes with two different sides. I mean, if interest rates are crazy high, then someone's not going to want to do a buy and hold deal. They're going to rather buy and sell. So those are the things I can't control. But one thing, like I mentioned, is we do have a pipeline lined up that we could be at the inflection point. If just two of those townhome projects hit and that we have going on at the same time, we are already staffed up, ready to manage that. And then at the same time, we have multiple duplexes, single families taking place that just kind of add project flow throughout the year. But one thing that we are starting to do now, we actually just raised money to develop our first deal, and it's a pretty exciting project. I can't say too much about it yet, but it's in one of the best neighborhoods of Dallas, and it has a ton of exposure. So it's really going to help kind of keep putting our name out there. And I'm actually doing it with one of my best friends is my co-developer. So we're hiring Ken Development to build it, and then I'm playing the another hat, the developer hat. So we raised the money and we closed last Monday on this piece of land, and we're in early stages of design. But hopefully we'll be able to break ground this late spring if everything works well. The unfortunate thing is in Dallas, doesn't matter if it's 3 units or 50 units or 200 units, you have to go under the same commercial review process. Whereas if it's a single family or duplex, you're under residential review. And our timeline is better than a lot of cities around the nation, but it goes from about 2 to 4 weeks for residential permits to get approved to about 3 to 4 months. And some people might be saying, well, that's still amazing. And yes, it is. It's a lot better, but it still slows you down, a little bit, but it will allow us time to kind of find the best financing, shop around the deal a little bit so we get a really good interest rate. But that's definitely something that we're going to be doing more of is we get shown deals all the time. And typically I look at my network of developers and say, okay, who's the best fit for this job? But now that we did raise the amount of money that we did and we have this group of people, I think we're going to start doing that a little bit more, especially if it's one of those deals that you just don't want to pass up. So that's definitely another thing. It ties to Ken Development in the sense Ken Development will be building it, but that's a little bit more on just the overall help, the way I'm going to try to help our companies make money while also getting some other deals kind of pushed forward a lot quicker, because at the end of the day, I get the say on when we are going to pull the trigger and break ground.
Yeah. Well, firstly, man, that's awesome. Congrats. I know permitting is always going to suck probably in any major city or really wherever you are, but that's really awesome. So congrats there. I know you kind of mentioned that a little bit in our last conversation too, that you kind of described Kent as 90% GC, 10% development, but you're
Yeah.
leaning more into doing things, under your own umbrella. So what do you think is really driving that shift? Is that just control of timelines, economics, or just wanting to do or own more of what you're building?
Well, I definitely think for right now, like I said, when projects get pushed and we had those on the pipeline projected to get started, that does create a little bit of a lull in your cash flow. And so that's definitely one reason. But the second one too is honestly, majority of our projects, like I said, I get sent so many deals and then I find the developer. I'm already kind of putting together the whole pro forma, and then I'll give it to, if it's a true developer, not just an investor, I'll give it to them, and then they'll plug in they have their own spreadsheets, they'll plug in their own numbers, and then they'll figure out the financing and where the money's coming from. But I'm doing a lot of that upfront work already. So if it's a good deal, I've made a lot of mistakes in the past, but we're at the point now we're very confident that you're still always going to make mistakes. I'm not saying that we're perfect. No one's perfect, but the big mistakes have been made. So you're just very confident that you understand at the upfront end of looking at a deal is, out of everything you can control, you kind of know within a 3 to 5% window on where the cost is going to be. And that's of course before any money has to come up front and you purchase the deal. So I just think it's more just like I said, we have the team now to take on more capacity. Some projects got pushed, so it's definitely something that I would like to have in our pipeline just to continue helping control our own destiny, if you will.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I agree that's definitely a great path to go on. And it's great to make mistakes too, that you've made so many in the past. Maybe not so many, but that you've been able to learn from them. So now you're very confident in what you do. So you can kind of branch off and vertically integrate in different ways, which is amazing for the future of the company. But I'll ask you one more question. So if a younger builder is about to make their first couple hires, or maybe they're at the point where they have a big project coming up or they need to hire for the future, something like that, where you were experiencing before, what would you tell them to standardize early on so they don't burn relationships? Any advice you want to give?
Well, I mean, when you do make your first early hires, it depends on how much knowledge you have for yourself about what you actually truly need. And so if you're coming from a larger company, but you're just early in the sense of you're starting your own business, you should probably know what that person and what that individual will need to make her successful in that position. But I would say one thing that's just so critical is if you do come in that position where you're really early on, don't be afraid to ask questions to people that have been doing this for a lot longer than you or in a position where you'd like to be one day. And that's something that I did fortunately do right is I have so many mentors and people in my network that I'm the first one to raise my hand and say, hey, I don't know something. Please tell me, what do you think? And thankfully, I had my father who's been doing this forever. So he knew when we were hiring people what they needed to have. But when I first got started, for any business, whether it's construction or whatever you're doing, you just go find 1, 2, 3 mentors and just meet with them. Just pick their brain, take them to coffee. Because when you're younger, people are so inclined and look eager to help you out because, well, one, they just liked, maybe they could see a little bit of themselves in you and they want to be able to help. But two, on the other end, they don't really see you as a threat, so they're more inclined to help out. If you wait too long or you assume that you already know everything, that's where you're most likely to make mistakes. And just take advantage of asking questions to more experienced people than you. I mean, that's truly where I would first start.
I love that, man. That's great advice. Thank you. Thank you, Austin. That was awesome. This has been great. I appreciate you being so open about everything, the growth curve, the painful parts, where you've been taking or where you plan to take on development in the next few years too. But before we close out, is there anywhere people should connect with you? Anywhere you're active most? Maybe a website or LinkedIn?
Yeah, so we really this year we're going to start. We have some very cool projects that we're finishing up, and so we're really just trying to get our social media more active. But I'd say the best place to reach me is just through our website. We have a inquiry link that gets emailed to one of our email accounts, kentdevco.com. I said for right now, that would be the easiest. Or you could find me on my own personal Instagram. I probably check that more than our business Instagram. So, and then that's just, I honestly, I'll have to figure out what it is. I can't even think of it off the top of my head. I think it's just like underscore Austin Kent. But one of those two areas, that would be the easiest to reach us. But our website, kentdevco.com, would probably be the first place to start.
Okay, awesome. I'll link the website below. For everybody listening, thanks for tuning in to The Intelligent Builder. If you found this episode valuable, make sure to share it with another builder or founder in your circle, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, Austin.
Thanks, Owen. Appreciate it, man. Have a good one.